I want to welcome everybody to the Patricia Clark Family Justice Center. I guess it is appropriate that we host this, since this is named after one of the most amazing judicial officers our county has ever known. And she was a Black woman, and her dedication to the youth of this county is unheralded. So I want to welcome you all to commemorate today, Black History Month. This is a dedicated time to reflect upon and celebrate the profound impact of Black individuals on our history, our culture, and our society. I remind you that Black history is American history. Amen. Black people have profoundly influenced this country across various realms. They have shaped its culture, its politics, its arts. From the struggles against slavery and segregation to the civil rights movement, Black individuals have been instrumental in advancing the principles of equality and justice. The contributions of Black Americans in fields like music, sports, literature, and science have left an indelible mark, enriching this country's great tapestry. As we recognize Black History Month, it's an opportunity to appreciate and celebrate the lasting impact of Black people on our society. It is a reminder of the resilience of a community, of the resilience of a people that have enriched us all. So I welcome you to this court to celebrate this wonderful month, but I also remind you that every day we should celebrate Black history. I have been asked to say a quick blessing. Judge McCullough, is Judge McCullough present? Nope. So I'm going to ask you to all join me in this blessing. It's not going to be as good as Judge McCullough's. I'm just going to let you know that now. But I do, again, want to welcome everyone, and I'm going to say what typically my family says. Bless us, O Lord, in these thy gifts, which we are about to receive through thy bounty. Amen. So now I invite you all to eat. I invite the group to start playing, and we will start with our short program momentarily. Welcome.
Okay, everybody welcome. My name is Tiana Ching. I am the co-lead for the African American History and Heritage Project for King County Superior Court. And we have brought you guys here today for our program. I hope that you all enjoy it. Now that everyone's gotten a bit of food, we're gonna get our program started, starting with the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on. Let us march on.
right. Thank you to Sherry Lee Ralph for that wonderful performance. The county budget did not stretch to getting her here in person, but we appreciate her anyway for her performance. Next, we have our spoken word performance by Anthony Settle from DJA. Thank you very much, Anthony.
First, I would like to thank Lottie for pushing me to do this poem, and my mentors. When I first wrote this, it was a little bit challenging to channel like all the feelings of how this athlete has motivated me. So I hope I capture it. The poem is titled "No Matter Where You Are, There You Are," and Allen Iverson is the one who inspired me. No matter where you are, there you are. And you can tell where I'm from by how I style my braids. And this very story influenced how I was raised. So let me take you through the night of my idol. In a night on Virginia in 1993, a night far from idle, your Allen Iverson, a basketball star, outpacing his rivals. You're a 17-year-old state champion. So you and two of your friends go to the bowling alley because they're like, you can't be him. And a crowd that cannot tell where you're from by how you style your braids. They talk, you talk, and they talk louder so the volume starts to raise. You tell them to quiet down and you can see the anger start to grow in their face. And as egos get tossed around the room fills with rage. And they're ready to rumble. So what do? You fight too? No. They catch you on scene, leaving the scene. I apologize. They catch you on screens, leaving the scene. They charge you with felony maiming by mob, a rarely used Virginia statute aimed to combat lynching. You spend 4 months at Newport News Correctional Facility before Douglas Wilder, Virginia State Governor, sets you free. And you're lucky for one shot because of one team. And that black coach promised you he'd put you up on those TV screens. And at 21, the Philadelphia 76ers select you to live your NBA dreams. And those same stars guided me as a teen because we threw a party for making it to 18. They sent out false narratives every day to kill my self-esteem. But trust me, this black boy has hit heights I never thought I could have seen. No matter where you are, there you are. And you can tell where I'm from by how I style my braids.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for your performance, which fits with our theme of athletes as activists. Next, we'll have our youth performance by Kenny Udrago from Seattle Prep. We have the pleasure of having this amazing, talented youth here today to share his gifts with the performance. This young person has been described as polite, unassuming, soft-spoken, such an endearing and powerful spirit. Here are just a few other things by the way of introduction. He is a youth intern at the Seattle Prep Intercommunity Peace and Justice Center, a youth scholar committee member, peer mentor, Seattle Cares mentoring movement. He's a former constituent correspondence intern for Mayor Bruce Harrell from July through August 2023. He's a mock trial program volunteer in June 2023 at Seattle Nativity School. He's a Seattle Clemency Project Summer High School intern, summer 2022. He's a summer 2022 tennis coach volunteer. His other activities include Associated Student Body President freshman and sophomore year, the the Black Student Union Vice President, Speech and Debate Club, football team manager, and more. Okay? Kenny is very busy. Thank you, Kenny.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for having me here today. Which mic do I? Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. All right, perfect. So today, the story I want to talk about is the story of Emmett Till. So 2 years ago, or actually last year, I guess, last school year, I went on a school trip to Washington, D.C., and it was a gathering of other Jesuit schools throughout the country. And my school group, we went to the National African American Museum. And it's a marvelous building, 6 floors, and it has many stories of our history. The thing that stood out to me from that trip, that tour, was Emmett Till's story. Now, I assume you all know the story of Emmett Till, the black boy in 1955 who was brutally murdered by a woman's husband and her brother-in-law because he was accused of whistling towards her. Now, Emmett Till's casket was on loan to the African American Museum, and it was on display. And when I saw it, the thing that stuck out to me the most was how small the casket was. My first thought when I saw the casket was, wow, that's a small casket, because usually when I stand next to people, I'm usually thinking like, I think like a casket that small would be for a child. And it was, because Emmett was a child. He was not a grown man to have a casket as big as, he could have had it if he had lived to adulthood. Emmett being 14, he died as a boy, and all we can remember him as is Emmett Till. He never got to be Dr. Till, Judge Till, Emmett Till, attorney at law, Congressman Till, or President Till, because those possibilities were taken from him at such a young age. Every day in our community, more people like Emmett Till will never get to reach such possibilities because the racism and prejudice permitted then and still is now blocks us from doing so. I, as a 17-year-old black male, have lived with the fear of ending up like Emmett Till, and the same fear that young black boys like Trayvon Martin, Elijah McClain, and Tamir Rice had to live with. Moreover, it's important that we learn our black history so we don't forget our struggle, where we came from, who fought for us, and who died for us. We need to learn the past so we can build a future where our stories are told by our successes and not by the tragedies that happened to us. Thank you.
Too short. I'm very short compared to Kenny, so we had to bring that down. Okay. Well, next we have another musical performance by the Zambuco Marimba Ensemble. If you're not ready, that's fine. We can. You ready? Okay.
A few words for us all. The magnificence of the universe, its beauty, its brilliance. It is wisdom and its understanding is one and the same with the Spirit dwelling within us. The stars are beacons beckoning us on, encouraging us to dream, insisting that we believe. Without the Spirit, the smallest obstacle is insurmountable. But with the Spirit, we are powerful and resilient, capable of becoming everything that we are created to be. And let the Spirit be upon the people so that we may all move together. Let's go, people! Woo, 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 woo.
Next, we have our keynote speaker, introduced by Judge Andrea Jarman.
We give the judge a hand clap.
Good afternoon. You can save your applause for the brilliant individual that I have the honor of introducing to you this afternoon. Dr. Cali Slair is the Education and Engagement Director at the Northwest African American Museum. Just a little bit about her and her wonderful career and path and who she is. She earned her PhD from the University of Texas at Austin and a BA in History from the University of Miami. She has over 8 years of experience as an educator for students ranging from pre-K to college. Now, I have 7 kids. That's a wonder right there. So that's magic right there, that she is an educational professional doing that work with that range of students and children. While attending the University of Texas at Austin, Dr. Slair also completed a graduate portfolio in museum studies and interned at the London Johnson Presidential Library. She has worked at several historical institutions, including the Black Archives History and Research Foundation of South Florida and Austin's George Washington Carver Museum and Cultural Center. She is an historian with a passion for creating engaging curriculum and using historical artifacts to advance our understanding of the past. We're delighted and honored to have you with us, Doctor. Please come forward. Please welcome her.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're bringing up the slides, but I just want to start by just saying how honored I am to be here with you all today, and just thank you to everyone for the musical performances, the spoken word performances, everyone who helped the planning. I appreciate you all so much. I also just want to take a moment to say about that spoken word performance. I'm originally from Virginia, so I really felt that, and it really spoke to me. I also played basketball. Obviously as a point guard. But thank you so much to everyone for being here. I know we're going to bring up the slides in a bit, but the first slide is just the title slide. So I figured I'd go ahead and get started and talk with you all today. So it's such an honor to be here. I wanted to start just by saying thank you to the African American History and Heritage Project. Thank you for having me here as your Black History Month keynote speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today to discuss the history, significance, and interconnectedness of race, athletics, and activism. And before we get into the main topic, I also wanted to just talk about the history and the significance of Black History Month. I appreciated the reminder earlier today in the program about Black history being American history and about every day being a day to celebrate Black history. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So I wanted to talk about that and the founding of Black history and Dr. Carter G. Woodson and why we celebrate Black History Month in February. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson was a historian, scholar, and educator who believed that the Black experience needed to be documented and the contributions of Black Americans should be celebrated, so much of what we're doing today. Commonly referred to as the father of Black history, he was born to formerly enslaved parents in New Canton, Virginia. Prior to his work as an educator, he worked on a farm and in coal mines. He earned his bachelor's degree in 1903, master's degree in 1908, and in 1912, he became the second Black person to receive a PhD from Harvard University after W.E.B. Du Bois. In 1915, Dr. Woodson formed the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which is known today as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. In 1916, he also created the Journal of Negro History, an academic journal that still exists today, under the name the Journal of African American History. This journal was the first journal to publish research findings on the scholarly contributions and achievements of Black people. And Dr. Woodson looked at the school curriculum of his time, and he stated that the curriculum taught Black children that their skin was a curse, and it helped to spread the doctrine of white supremacy. And he sought to fix the problems with the school curriculum and counter the notion that Black people were inferior to white people through a week-long school program on Black history. In 1926, Dr. Woodson launched the first Negro History Week, which aimed to provide teachers, citizens, and students with a curriculum that spoke against the racist societal discourse and curriculum of the time. He sought to provide an uplifting message for Black school children, and he celebrated that week once a year in February. But his initial goal and his initial hope was that over time, Black history would become part of the traditional history curriculum, the goal to which we are all working towards today. He launched Negro History Week in the second week of February to coincide with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. In 1932, he noticed that different schools were participating and that race relations were improving as a result of the education provided from Negro History Week. In the 1970s, Negro History Week expanded to the Black History Month that we know today, thanks to students at Kent State University, who in 1969 pushed for the creation of Black History Month. In 1970, there was the first Black History Month, and in 1974, President Gerald Ford met with civil rights leaders such as Jesse Jackson. And he hoped that this would reaffirm the nation's commitment to racial justice. In 1976, US President Gerald Ford issued a statement on the importance of Black History Month to all Americans. Since Ronald Reagan, the 40th US president, every US president has issued a Black History Month proclamation. In accordance with Dr. Carter G. Woodson's original aims, scholars, citizens, educators, students, activists continue to call for Black History Month to be a part of the standard US history curriculum and for Black history to be included in history education throughout the year. And as we all know, that's not true in all states, and so we're all working towards that. Dr. Carter G. Woodson called for the celebration, recognition, and documentation of the important contributions of Black Americans, not just for their ability to uplift people, but also for the purpose of accurate and objective storytelling and remembrance of America's past. Black history as American history is deeply intertwined in America's 20th and 21st century political, social, military, and diplomatic history. There are numerous examples of Black athletes who use their platforms to challenge racial injustice, as well as many efforts by the United States government and foreign governments to shape, challenge, manipulate, and question narratives about race relations in America through the experiences, perspectives, and treatment of Black athletes. I appreciate so much seeing the images of so many Black athletes and activists included today. As a historian, one of the things that we do, one of the arguments that we'll always make, thank you, not the technology person, thank you, is how important present day phenomena are in their relationship to the past. And the fact that the things that we're experiencing today are not new and in many ways are a continuation or a return to the past. In this way, many of the contemporary and more well-known examples of athlete activists such as Colin Kaepernick, LeBron James, and his advocacy, Naomi Osaka, and the Black Lives Matter movement are efforts to that are powerful and important examples, but that are not new. And the things that I want to talk about today is how athletes use their platforms to speak out against racial injustice and to push for political impact and social change. And one of the biggest takeaways from it is that it works. They're building upon and contributing to a national and global tradition and legacy of activating athletics and activism. And we want to look at those themes, some historic examples, and impact and origins of athletes as activists. And so thinking back to those origins, I want to talk about a story that is well known and then one that is probably lesser known. So in 1947, Jackie Robinson joined the Brooklyn Dodgers, making him the first Black Major League Baseball player of the modern era. And the integration of baseball paved the way for athletes to serve as activists for social change. A lesser known example of an African-American baseball player who was also an activist for social change is Leroy Satchel Paige. He's remembered as one of the greatest baseball pitchers of all time. I had the privilege when I was at the University of Miami of hearing incredible stories in my classes about the 60s about the pitching of Satchel Paige. But due to racist segregation laws, he was not able to participate in Major League Baseball during his prime. He was a teammate of Jackie Robinson, but he was not chosen to be the individual to lead the integration or the first choice into Major League Baseball. In 1948, although he was not first, he was signed as the first Black pitcher and the American League, and he signed with the Cleveland Indians. He was 42 years old. He was the oldest rookie to join the major leagues, and by then, he was out of his prime. But even out of his prime, his team still led the World Series, and they won. Many players, those who played in both the Negro Leagues and the major leagues, remember him as the best pitcher that they ever faced. And in 1971, Page became the first baseball player from the Negro Leagues to be elected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame due to his speed, his skill, and his showmanship. And I wanted to talk about another, maybe lesser known example of athletes and activists. So in the 1960s, according to Life magazine, and for most of us as we know, is considered a decade when everything changed. Drastic and immense social change that defined the 60s was brought forth by struggle, sacrifice, and demands for justice and equality. The Selma March, the Montgomery bus boycott, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Civil Rights Act, all those things happened in the 60s. And during this era, activist athletes also spoke out against racism and protested against segregation. In 1963, a football team, then known as the Oakland Raiders, now known as the Las Vegas Raiders, that was hard for me, I grew up with them as the Oakland Raiders, but in 1963, the Oakland Raiders there were 4 African-American football players who refused to play an exhibition game that was scheduled to be held in Mobile, Alabama, where stadiums practiced what was known as block seating. And block seating was a term that was used to describe racial segregation at sporting events. Black people could play on the teams, but black fans had to sit in segregated seating. No matter how much money people had, they couldn't buy better seats. These 4 players on the Oakland Raiders were scheduled to play against the New York Jets in 1963, and they knew that their African-American fans would be restricted to seats and have to use separate folding chairs rather than stadium seating. The Raiders team included 4 African-American players, and the Jets included 7 African-American players. The 4 African-American Raiders players who stood up and threatened to boycott and protest in protest of the game were Clem Daniels, Art Powell, Bo Robertson, and Fred Williamson. They let their coach know, their coach was Al Davis, that they would not play in the game unless the fan seating was integrated. Their coach, Al Davis, stated that he wouldn't fine them, he would not suspend them, and as a man, he didn't blame them for what they believed in. The proposed boycott worked. Since the sponsors did not honor the demand for integration at the Alabama Stadium, both the Raiders organization and the Jets organization agreed to move the game to the Raiders Stadium where fan seating was integrated. And the Oakland Raiders boycott reflected the perspective of activists, especially young activists in the 1960s, who impatiently demanded for racial justice and battled segregation. This incident was considered an embarrassment for the state of Alabama, whose reputation was already being harshly criticized in the civil rights movement. And it demonstrated the power that athletes can have when they speak out against social injustice. In addition, the Raiders... Absolutely, thank you. In addition, the Raiders boycott shows a theme that is still present and expressed by activist athletes today, like LeBron James and others. It's the paradox of race and sport in America. And there's a continued theme that despite one's wealth, fame, and the admiration of the public, Black athletes still face racial challenges, discrimination, and racism in America. Last year, during Black History Month, I had the privilege of meeting and talking with Dr. Damian Thomas. He was a fellow Cold War historian and the current sports curator at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC. In addition to his work in the field of museums, Dr. Thomas previously worked as a professor, and he wrote a book called Globetrotting African American Athletics and Cold War Politics. And in his book, he highlights the efforts by the U.S. Department of State to counter the Soviet Union's criticism of America's treatment of African Americans during the Cold War. Dr. Thomas's work highlights another aspect of the complex relationship between race and sports in America's history. The U.S. government and foreign governments have had efforts to engage Black athletes and the narrative surrounding Black athletes to further their geopolitical and diplomatic aims. During the Cold War, the period of tense ideological, geographical, economic, and military conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union from 1947 to 1991, the United States and the Soviet Union competed on every front possible to determine which country would emerge as the sole superpower. The Soviet Union routinely criticized America's treatment of African Americans for its hypocrisy and cited it as evidence of the shortcomings of U.S. claims of freedom and equality. To counter these critiques during the Cold War, the U.S. government would send African American athletes abroad on goodwill tours and have them participate in international competitions to serve as cultural ambassadors and symbols of idealized American values. These government efforts abroad to depict prosperous African American athletes like Jackie Robinson, Jesse Owens, and the Harlem Globetrotters as distinguished citizens of the African diaspora, rather than citizens who were still objected to racial oppression at home, were countered by Black athletes like Tommy Smith and John Carlos, who famously gave the human rights, often looked at as the Black Power salute, at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics. In this image, you see a photo of the sculpture from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, curated by Dr. Damian Thomas, who I mentioned earlier, in the gallery Sports, Leveling the Playing Field. Depicted here are John Carlos and Tommy Lee, the African American sprinters and medalists who won on October 16, 1968, and gave the Black Power salute to protest discrimination. All three men, including the second place medalist Peter Norman of Australia, are now recognized for their courage and their activism. Smith and Carlos had won medals for the 200-meter race and were members of the Olympic Project for Human Rights, a movement of African American athletes and activists who at that time threatened to boycott the Olympics. The international Olympic community agreed to continue to refuse teams from countries that practiced apartheid at that time, denying basic rights to Native Africans in their countries. The Olympic boycott was called off, but Smith and Carlos still recognized the importance of taking a stand in the civil rights movement. In response to their symbolic act of protest, raising a black gloved fist and wearing no shoes to represent African American poverty, these American athletes and activists were removed from the Olympic Village and sent home. Norman of Australia was reprimanded, and neither of the three ever raced in the Olympics again. In the Cold War, Black athletes increasingly resisted being used as propaganda and used sports to challenge their continued oppression. At the same time that the U.S. government sought to use athletes as examples of America's willingness to incorporate racial minorities into American society, Black athletes used their platform to bring attention to the unpunished lynching of African Americans, segregated schooling, and obstruction of Black voting rights. In 2005, Carlos and Lee were honored with a statue at their university, San Jose State, and in 2008, Peter Norman, his nephew made a documentary about his treatment, which led to Australia's parliament issuing a posthumous apology for the lack of support of Norman. And in 2016, NMAC, as it's called for short, honored the men with the statue that you see pictured. Also in 2018, Australia commissioned a statue of Peter Norman along with the humanitarian award in his name. And the salute at 1968 is considered the most famous protest in modern sports history. It's a national activist aim. It's a global activist aim, the connection of athletics and activism. In conclusion, I wanted to talk about how sports-based activism is not unprecedented. It's been activated and used successfully for decades in America and abroad. It has also been traditionally met with criticism. In 2020, professional athletes in the NBA, WNBA, Major League Baseball, and Major League Soccer refused to play games on the same day, August 26th, in the wake of the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin. As I said earlier, the main takeaways related to athlete activism and activism in general is that it works to produce change. Colin Kaepernick's protests cost him his football career, but research supports that his activism increased passion and awareness in the Black community and white community. According to a study of political behavior among Black Americans, Kaepernick was a powerful mobilizing force who inspired nearly 1/3 of Black people polled to donate to a political cause, attend a protest, or boycott the NFL, and more than half of respondents said Kaepernick inspired them to vote in a local or national election. While athletes as activists is not a new phenomenon, the contemporary activation of athletes as activists is unique due to its size. Contemporary activism is the largest and broadest mobilization of African American athletes and their supporters yet. The increase in participation is attributed to a greater number of women in sports who are professional athletes, as well as activists, and a greater participation across a number of sports. Activist athletes use their talents, their perspectives, and they use their resources to empower themselves and their community to bring about social and political change in the fight for equity and justice. Political activism in sports aims to raise awareness of racial and social injustices and structural inequality. Athlete activism creates a ripple effect. It spreads awareness and it spreads outrage over racial injustice. Some of the Seattle-based sports players, Sue Bird, Megan Rapinoe, Russell Wilson, all wore Black Lives Matter t-shirts when they hosted the ESPYs in 2020 and spoke out about the killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. Past and contemporary activist athletes include athletes from various racial backgrounds who force the government and society to confront the tough questions of does the government and does society still value, respect, and support the lives and contributions of people in color when they are not in their uniforms. As we celebrate Black History Month on this day, it's important to remember and honor the many contributions, approaches, and combined efforts in pursuit of freedom, equality, and justice. And it's also important to recognize that work is not yet done, and the fight for justice and equality continues and requires the contributions of us all. And I just want to say thank you all so much for having me here today. Thank you all so much. And if anyone has any questions at this time or thoughts, please feel free to ask them or share them. Y'all let me off the hook too easy.
Thank you again to Dr. Cali Slair. I learned a lot about the Raiders. I'm a New Yorker, but I'm not a Jets fan. All right, well, we'll be having our raffle next, but first I'm going to do some closing remarks. Thank you to everyone who participated, donated, funded, sponsored, or volunteered in support of this event. Especially thank you to Dr. Cali Slair, Anthony Seto, Kenny Udrago, the Zambuco Marima Ensemble, Judge Veronica Galvan, Judge Josephine Wiggs, and Judge Andrea Jarman, to myself as the co-lead, and to my fellow co-lead, Lati, the AHP committee members, Judge Leroy McCullough, Sisters Who Care, the King County Superior Courts and Community Committee, and the book and raffle donors. Thank you for coming to our event. We hope that you enjoyed yourself, and we hope to see you again next year.